straight from the mayor's mouth, with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Straight from the Mayor's Mouth. Good morning then, Matt. How are you, mate?
Good, thank you. How's the new name and new theme going? Are you getting any feedback on it?
Oh, I'm liking it. Yes, absolutely. I think that very official sort of feel about it. It's I do love it, and I do know the fact that the people out there listening are enjoying it as well. So it's nice to hear.
Well, we got more listeners last week than
Excellent.
normal, so
that's very
I don't
good.
know whether there was something in particular that we spoke about that grabbed people's attention, or they wanted to hear the new theme.
I'd suggest it has to be the latter for sure. Now, mate, let's sort of jump in. It was very sad during the week to hear of the passing of one of Dubbo's great stalwarts in Brian Barnes, wasn't it?
Well, a real stalwart of the Dubbo business community, I'd say, but he's been an active contributor to the community for many years. So our condolences to the family. And
absolutely.
Obviously, I know Brian's son, Anthony, quite well. I knew Brian quite well as well, but Anthony was a couple of years above me at school. I can't remember, might have only been 1 year. Maybe I'm putting his age up a bit on him. But, look, it's always sad to see people at a funeral, but also gratifying when someone's contributed to the community as much as Brian did. Yes. And I think that was the significant thing to me, just thinking back and understanding the things, you know, a little bit about someone, but when you go to their funeral and you watch, in this case, a video eulogy, which is a different way of doing it, but just seeing some of that and just seeing about Brian. And one of the things that Anthony commented to me afterwards was that there are so many things in his life that he didn't realise replicated his dad's life.
Is that right?
And didn't think about that until he sat down to do the eulogy and went, wow, I've kind of followed in Dad's footsteps in a whole range of ways. Yes. Of course, they've got the Sports Power Centre there and some challenges coming up for Anthony there with Rebel Sports opening across the road, literally across the road from them.
That's right, yes.
Yeah. So anyway, our condolences to the family, but well done as well. Congratulations, Brian, on the great contribution you made to Dubbo in a whole range of different areas.
I agree. Now, mate, during the week as well, you held one of the past, present and future leadership forums and luncheons. Now, this, I think, is a terrific idea. This is an opportunity here where you get some of the past councillors, you get them all back together. It's a bit like a road trip, having a road trip of all the people back in, all the old ones back in together again. So I suppose a couple of quick little things. The point of the exercise, apart from obviously a social gathering to get everyone back together, but what was the main reason to bring everybody back in and who was there?
Well, I had an idea from the amalgamation to when the new council came along and then after that, that we seemed to have a lot of talent in our community that we then ignored. And I remember when I was on council previously with the Dubbo City Council, there were people on that council that had a lot of experience. So as a councillor and then as the mayor, I used to turn to some of those people for various bits of advice and just ask them things. And then there were people that used to be on council as well who I used to talk to and gain some advice from, and it was nice to have that connection because experience, you can't replace experience.
Absolutely.
And then when the amalgamation happened and then the new council was elected, I know I spoke to a few other former councillors and it felt like all this knowledge, all this experience had been completely ignored. And one of the things, just a simple thing, one of the things we used to do on council is that Dubbo Day Awards, held on the 23rd of November every year. For Dubbo Day, we would invite all former councillors along and hopefully you could make it along and then they'd hand out some of the Dubbo Day Awards. It was a nice way just to acknowledge a bit of that past there. But even that got thrown out.
So that was gone.
That was gone. So there was no recognition of those former councillors. And I just thought there seems to be so much knowledge and information there. So last year, I started what I called the inaugural Past, Present and Future Luncheon.
It's a great name.
And now it's the traditional Past, Present and Future Luncheon.
Once you go past one, it becomes a tradition, doesn't it? That's
exactly right. And it really was that idea. Every councillor for Wellington Shire Council, Dubbo City Council, the Talbragar Shire Council.
Well, we are going back a bit here.
That's right. Yeah. And the former Dubbo City Council that existed before the amalgamation in 1980, and obviously Dubbo Regional Council. So basically everyone that's been involved in council.
So if you're a councillor in any of those sort of forums, you got an invite to
Correct.
attend.
Excellent. And maybe we didn't get everyone the first time because we might not have had all contact details for everyone, but certainly we had a few that let us know that they didn't receive an invite, so we made sure that we filled in those gaps, and I'm pretty confident that everyone that's been involved in the past got an invite for this one. And we end up with 22 people at a luncheon.
Yeah, lovely.
And part of it was, again, you've got these people who were passionate and still are passionate about their community, all this experience, all this knowledge. And I looked around the room at the luncheon and I said, we've got maybe 250 years of councillor experience in this room. For a start, let's take advantage of that. And we had 5 of our current councillors there at the luncheon, so they can hear what the other people had to say. You've got that, but also these people are out there in the community. And one of the particular former councillors pulled out a sheet of paper and said, I've been thinking about this lunch in the last couple of weeks. I've been talking to a few friends, and here's a few ideas they've given me. And one of the things that I said when this particular person said that was that these people are all out in the community still. You don't have to be a councillor to have people that respect you, that have people that
So that's an opinion, so that's ideas, yes.
Exactly right. So let's bring them all in together and see what we can get out of it. But we had people there from those various councils. They went back as far as, and they couldn't quite remember, but around 1976, 1977 were the first council experiences that we had there. Yeah. And so that was again before that amalgamation with Talbragar Shire. And then obviously people from Wellington Shire and Dubbo City Council and then Dubbo Regional Council. But there were also people that had served on other councils. So Berkshire, and then they moved to Dubbo and then served on Dubbo. And Warrenshire Council, then again moved to Dubbo and served on Dubbo.
So who were some of the older names that were there?
Well, I'll run through the names so you get a bit of an idea. So you had Mike Orgy, he's a Wellington Shire councillor, Doug Butcherine, Terry Dray, Evan Elliott, Dawn Fardell, David Grant, Dane Gumley, Bill Kelly, Paul Oxley, Greg Matthews, Richard Mutton, Kevin Parker, Sam Peacock, Brian Semler, Alan Smith, John Walcombe, Kim Williams, and then you had the councillors there, myself and Matt Wright and Kim Williams and Pam Wells and Vicky Etheridge.
That's a great lineup.
Well, it was, and it was a fascinating conversation. A whole range of things were discussed and brought up, and just some very specific issues, some big picture issues. But I think the main thing was that, and I'm quite happy for the community. I mean, council paid for this lunch for all these people. I'm quite happy to put my hand up and say I authorise the payment of lunch for all these people, if for nothing else than a mark of respect for the contribution that all these people have made to where we are today.
Absolutely.
And some of them might be critical of me, and again, it wasn't other councillors. This is purely my decision. The expenditure obviously wasn't very much. We're talking about lunch for 20 people, so there wasn't no alcohol, of course.
Let's just think about it for a sec. Like a lot of these guys, and still today, it's a nominal figure that councillors get. And the opportunity to be respected again, to know the fact that what you did and what you contribute is still being respected today. And to have an opportunity for a lunch, I think it's a fabulous idea. So, yeah, I don't think there's any need for anyone to feel as though they need to justify, to bring people in who did some great contributions to our community, to recognise them again as still great stalwarts of our community as well.
And think about where we are today. You only get to where you are today by people in the past doing the various amounts of work that need to happen to get to where we are today. Now, and talk about payments, there was some discussion there from some of the councillors. There were 3 that were on council back in the 70s, and they weren't quite sure, but they thought it was about $2,000 a year they got paid.
$2,000, there you
go. Now, of course, we discussed it only last week. It's going to go up to $26,000 from the 1st of July. Obviously, there's inflation in there as well. Yeah. But, it's not a lot of money.
No, it's not.
But again, a lot of information, a lot of opinions. And hopefully, my intention is certainly, even when I'm gone, for this to be a traditional luncheon, that we just have that ability for these people to have some input. And I took notes the whole time we were there. I probably wrote 3 pages of notes from different ideas that were thrown around and different things that were brought forward.
Oh, wonderful.
And it was also good for our...
Well, listening through a few of those names, I'm sure there's still plenty that will offer an opinion to you.
Oh, that's right. Actually, one of them turned up and they said, you've allocated 2 hours for this lunch. Why 2 hours for this lunch? And I said, you got 20 or so people here that used to be on council. You don't reckon they're going to have a bit to say? And it did go past the 2 hours. We got to the 2 hour mark and a few had to go back to their workplaces. But we kept going for a bit of time after that. And then even after that, there was a bit of time where some little groups of people that were on council together were catching up with people.
Oh, it's a great chance to catch up as well.
Yeah, it was very nice.
I notice here, Matt, a climate change and resilience committee was something that you attended here during the week. So I always find these titles rather interesting because there's so many different groups in that. And so trying to get my head around exactly which group is which group, each week some new group pops up. And this is a new one for me, the Climate Change and Resilience Committee. Now, is this part of the council organisation here in town? Is this one of our groups or is this a broader group?
This is one of our community consultative groups. When we're reforming all these committees, we thought one around climate change and making us more resilient would be an important one to have.
So is there any specific focus then that this group has?
Surprisingly enough, climate change and resilience.
Apart from that, when you look back at that question, you think, oh, duh. But apart from the obvious, is there a specific focus that they look at here within council structures?
It really is looking at the future, and the different committees have different focus points, and there are various terms of reference we have for all these different committees, but this one really is looking at what council can do for council, but also the community. So in other words, an organisation, any organisation out there might have their own climate change process to try and achieve net zero, for example, or look at what they can do as an organisation. But council has a dual role to play. First of all, as an organisation that employs 500 people, as an organisation that has turnover of a couple $100 million a year, any organisation should be looking at what impact they're having on the environment, what that organisation can do. But with council, you've got that extra role of leading the community. So we may do things that may not return an exact benefit to the bottom line financially, but are doing or it's doing something for the overall environment and doing something in a leadership perspective. I mean, we've talked about some of those things. I mean, EVs is one of those classic ones where you've really got to play that role of leading the community. This particular one, a whole range of different issues were discussed at this latest committee meeting. And this
is there one particular thing that would really stood out to you from the discussions?
Absolutely. There was one thing that I'll get to in a moment. But remember, this has got some councillors on it. It's got some council staff that are focusing in this particular division of council, but also community members. And obviously, when you put your hand up to be a community member, you're not paid for it. You've got to have a passion for it. And there are so many different committees. You really want those people that are focused on it and passionate about that area. And we've definitely got that in this particular scenario. One of the main points of discussion in this latest committee meeting was around our Willandra Waste Depot, or the TIP, as most people refer to our waste depots as. Now, we've got some things that occur there, and we take some waste from some other areas. So we take waste from Mid-Western Regional Council. We take waste from Narromine, for example. And obviously we've got our own waste there. Now, it's a huge facility, and I remember Stuart McLeod, who was a former director, when we were talking about this facility many years ago, talked about the lifetime of this facility being maybe 250 years, which sounds unbelievable, the amount of space, the area we've got there.
Yes.
That's actually not true anymore. It was true when Stuart said it because of the conditions that we had.
Is the time frame decreased or?
Decreased quite dramatically. And the reason that's happened is because when Stuart made those estimations, the rules or the laws as they were at the time meant that people came out and they brought their rubbish and we dumped it in landfill, and that was pretty much the end of it. That's being a little bit blasé about it, and it's not quite accurate. There were some processes in place, but in general, you brought it out, you dumped it in there. What we're at now is the EPA is telling all organisations, typically councils that run a TIP, they've got to get to a point where of all the rubbish that's brought out to a TIP, only 20% of that can go into landfill.
Wow.
80%
that's a change.
It is. 80% needs to be diverted to different areas. So to give you an example, when someone brings in concrete or oil or tyres or maybe even some solar panels, all of this other rubbish needs to be diverted
Does all that stuff have to be recycled or reused? Or?
That's exactly the idea. So when we start to talk about this whole area, as Stuart talked about when it was going to be used mainly for landfill, we had that area there. But now we've got to try and keep it off into separate areas and see what we can do with it. So tyres that are brought up, we need to keep a separate area for tyres. Or obviously asbestos is a separate issue again. That's not so much for recycling, it's for safety. But then you start to talk about these different areas. So concrete, how can we reuse concrete, for example? Is there some way we can do that?
Actually, isn't it?
Huge challenge. Now, we've been working away at this for some time, and we're getting there. We're getting up around the high 40%, almost 50% of what comes in now gets diverted rather than put into landfill, but 50% isn't 80%. So we've still got a little way to go.
Quite often that's the hardest bit now to find something with, isn't it?
Getting down to that last part, that's exactly right. And so that's a challenge for us. But here's the other part of that challenge. When we start to talk about getting towards net zero, again, as an organisation, not as a city, but getting down to net zero, then we have to look at where our greenhouse gas emissions come from. And we look at all the various parts of council. The number one contributor, far and away number one contributor to our greenhouse gas emissions is from our TIP. So about 62%.
62%?
Of our greenhouse gas emissions come from the TIP. Now, that's a lot of that is methane.
I would never have picked that.
Exactly right. Most people don't think about that. And that's mainly methane, because methane is much worse as a greenhouse gas than CO2, for example.
Yep.
So trying to reduce that means that the less we can put in a landfill, the further in front we are there
so
for a
to try
start.
to achieve a net zero figure, that's where the big focus needs to be, doesn't it?
Exactly right. And one of the points of discussion from our last council meeting was the size of our red bin. There were people in our community who said, our red bin, we've got our 3 bins, our red bin isn't big enough for all the rubbish from that household, in particular when you've got a few kids, for example, and you've got a household that uses more stuff in general. So the red bin needs to be bigger. Well, I'm not saying it needs to be bigger. There were some people in the community who said, should the red bin be bigger? Now, we had that question come through at our last council meeting. The general logic was, well, to change the red bin size now would be very expensive.
It will be counterproductive to what you're trying to achieve as well, isn't it?
Well, that's the second part of it. So the first part is we're about halfway through a 10-year contract for the collection of our waste, our red bins. To then go and say to that particular waste provider that we're going to change the size of a red bin to go to a larger bin, well, they'd say, sure thing, but here's the new price of that contract that you're now altering halfway through. So it would be expensive, but you hit the nail on the head. The second part of it is it wouldn't really work if we're trying to reduce the amount of rubbish that goes into our landfill.
But then you're encouraging people with bigger bins to put more stuff in. That doesn't really work.
You hit the nail on the head. So that wouldn't help us achieve our 80% target. It wouldn't help us achieve a reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions, and it might be convenient for people. So what we really need to do is encourage people to use our green bin, to use our yellow bin, and minimise that red bin. Make sure you put as little as possible into our red bin and see how much you can put into, well, not how much you can put into, but how much you can not put into the red bin by using the other bin. So interesting discussion, but again, you don't know really, all these different committees, you don't know what might be a topic of discussion and what might come out of this.
Yep.
One of the things as well is that we're going to do more education. We're doing a joint project where we've got a staff member that's shared amongst Mudgee, Dubbo and Narromine to do some more education around our FOGA, around our green bin. So food organics and garden organics, what can you put in there? What sort of things can you do with that? We want to get more into that, again, more of our red bin, and that's about education. So we've actually got one person employed to do exactly that.
So is there anything, like from this committee meeting, were there any recommendations that they're going to pass on now to council?
Probably not so much recommendations per se from this one. Sometimes there are some recommendations that might go. This one was really more about informing the committee where we're up to, for example, with this education officer. So that's happening now as we speak. But also letting them know that we are going to bring to council a net zero strategy to try and have that and have some targets in place, all that type of thing. So probably not so much recommendations out of that. It was really about here's some discussions around that and getting these people that are passionate in our community to understand and be aware of these things, and also just have some comments from those on some of these things that are happening. So fascinating, and fascinating so many different things that council's involved with.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I do like this one. The official opening of the Archibald Prize finalists. Now, this is a wonderful thing, isn't it? Here we have this magnificent facility here in Dubbo for the Western Plains Cultural Centre. And every year now we get the Archibald Prize. The finalists all come along, including, I'd suggest, that the winner. They all come here, and I think also, are we the last one on the list as well, Matt? Is this how this works? We're the last time that this exhibition is being shown this year in this place?
This is the 2022 finalists. So these are all the finalists. Well, actually not quite. I'll talk about that in a moment. But there were go back to 2022. You've got people who enter the Archibald, our best known and most prestigious and also richest portraiture prize, in fact, probably our richest art prize in general. $100,000 goes to the winner.
It's a good prize for an artist.
Good prize. 816 entries were received by the trustees for the Archibald last year for 2022. Of those 816, they chose 52 that were worthy to be deemed finalists.
Yes.
And then, of course, from those 52, a winner is chosen.
Do you know if anyone can put a portrait in?
This is the great part about the Archibalds. It is open to anyone. Right. There's no criteria except it's got to be a portrait, obviously. That's part of the whole concept.
Yep.
And so it's really one of those things that it's open to any – and look, I'm sure there are conditions. I'm sure they've got to be an Australian. I'm sure you to put a portrait in, you've got to say, yes, I am Australian. It's not an international prize as far as I know, but it's a great thing. Anyone can say, I could win $100,000 if my art's good enough.
Yeah.
I could possibly win $100,000. Yeah, it's fantastic.
So you were at the opening there the other night and checked out. Was there a good crowd turn up?
It was actually a really good crowd, and people know the Archibald. We've got our Western Plains Cultural Centre. It's one of the things that we have in our community, I think, that's very focused on our creative or artistic community, which is fantastic. Love it. The Archibald, though, is something that people know. Yes. And it's one of the great things that I do when I jump in taxis in Sydney and talk about why you're in Sydney still. You've got all these wonderful regional areas like Dubbo, for example, to come and live in. Why you're still here. And we often have a bit of a discussion around the advantages of living in regional areas versus the non-advantages of living in Sydney.
Absolutely. Nice way of putting it.
And I talk about sometimes different things you can see. And, of course, people in Sydney sometimes think if you want to go to theatre or art, you've got to be in Sydney. And I often say to them, how many times have you seen the finalists from the Archibald? And most taxi drivers I talk to say, never. I say, well, I've seen it, and I think this is the 4th exhibit we've had now in Dubbo of all the finalists. 2017 was the last time we had it here. But I say, I've seen it approximately 4 times now. I've seen this one. And I've seen all of those finalist groups in Dubbo, not in Sydney. And so you start to just open the minds of people in Sydney sometimes when you start to talk about these things here. So, again, it's pretty exciting. We opened the Western Plains Cultural Centre the 10th of February 2007 was when Marie Bashir came along as the governor of the day and officially opened the Western Plains Cultural Centre. I think we actually opened the doors late 2006, but the governor couldn't make it till early 2007. And from that time there, again, this is only from memory, I'm sure this is the 4th time we've had the full finalist exhibition.
It's a very exciting thing, isn't it? Like,
it is.
It's one of those things that, as you say, living here in Dubbo, to have that opportunity to go along and to see this. Honestly, we're not trying to sort of smack the cities here, but we are. But it's great. It's good fun. But if you go into the city, the sort of thing, to get into the New South Wales Art Gallery to see it is such a difficult situation. But for us, it's literally drive downtown, park out the front, go in, pay a couple of bucks and happy days.
That's
and
right.
You get it. It's wonderful.
So there's 52 finalists from last year. Only 51 are on display. Normally we've got the whole lot. And this is the last
Did someone drop
run.
a painting or something?
You'd be horrified, wouldn't you, if that happened?
Smack to me, that bloke.
So that's toured around, and this is the last one. So Dubbo's very lucky. We've got the very last viewing of the 2022. But one of the artists has got his own exhibition in Brisbane at the moment, which is a big deal for him to have this particular exhibition. And so he did ask permission, because when you enter, you say, I'm entering my portrait in this. If I do make it through as a finalist, I accept the fact that, yes, it will be on tour for a year. I can't have my painting back for a year. This particular artist asked for permission from the trustees of the New South Wales Art
Special
Gallery.
exemption.
Yeah, so they gave him permission because they said, well, yes, it is a pretty big deal. And you've got your own exhibition. And the fact that you have a painting that's a finalist in the Archibalds, and then people come in to see your exhibition and they go, where's your painting? Yeah. Oh, sorry, it's down in Dubbo at the moment. So they did give them permission. So we've got 51 of the 52, which is still significant.
Oh, absolutely.
We've got the winner, the portrait by Black Douglas is there. So that's obviously important to have the winning prize.
Were you impressed by it?
Well, I'm impressed by all of them. I am not artistic at all.
No, I'm with you.
And when I look at them, and there's a couple of different styles there, I sometimes look at the ones that look like a photo. And I say, wow, look at that. Imagine being able to paint like that. And some people who are art experts say, that's nothing. That's someone who's good technically. And then there's a painting, for example, of Peter Garrett by Arndo.
Right.
And I look at that painting and it's got more than the required number of eyes in your head. And I look at that and I go, he can't even get the number of eyes right. And I'm saying this with the greatest respect to Arndo.
I imagine the artist saying, oh, you heathen.
But that's exactly right. People who are art experts say, look at what Arndo's done there. Look at the interpretation of Peter Garrett. Isn't that fantastic? But again, I'm not an art expert, so please take this with a grain of salt. But I look at the ones that look like photos and go, that's incredibly clever.
I like that, yes.
Now, people who are experts say, well, if you want a photo, go and get a camera. We're talking about artistic interpretations here. But the great thing about it is, and Anne Jones was there.
Right.
Sorry, Anne Ryan was there. I've got Anne Jones, the former mayor of Wellington, there in my mind.
She may turn up as well.
Anne Ryan, she's the curator of Australian art from the Art Gallery of New South Wales. So she officially does the curation for these exhibitions. And she was there and she said, one of the things that's important is that you don't expect everyone to like every painting in an exhibition. You expect them to invoke emotions, and you want people to say, "I love that one," and "I hate that one." I think that's terrible, and that's horrific there. And look at that one over there; it stirs up emotions. And that's what art should do. It should stir up emotions from people, and that's fantastic. So go and have a look at them.
Yeah,
don't necessarily go, "I
Get
love them
stirred
all,"
up and
exactly
feel
right.
emotional and all of that. Yes.
But I do enjoy looking at them, and I do think there's fantastic
Yes.
skills there. And one of them, for example, has got this huge frame around it. And I said to Anne Ryan, I said, so when the trustees are judging these, do they judge that frame as part of the painting? She said, well, you can't not judge it because it's been created as an artwork with that frame as part of it. So, yes, that has been part of the whole judging process. It has to be.
Right.
So, yeah, look, it is fascinating. But the other thing that's a bit interesting from this one is that the Archibald Prize was started back in 1921.
Right.
It was a former editor of the Bulletin who died previous to that and left some of his fortune and said, I want an art prize. And so it's gone on from there. As I said before, it's now up to $100,000 in terms of first place for that particular prize. So you would think, well, the 2022 prize, 1921 was the first, so the 2022 prize would be the 102nd, you would think. But it's not. It's actually the 100th winner of the prize.
Okay, so my maths is normally okay. I'm not working this one out. What happened?
Exactly right. So in 1964 and in 1980, there was no winner of the Archibald.
Oh, why is that?
And the trustees in those 2 years said there is no painting here of the standard required to be classified as the winner of the Archibald Prize.
Ooh, ouch.
We're not awarding a winner.
Now, there's a decent sort of slap with a paintbrush in someone's face for that one.
And I thought exactly the same thing. I thought, wow, how would you feel if you looked at a painting and said, that won this year, I entered my painting in there, and I can see, yeah, that's a pretty good painting. I can see why that might have won. But to have the information go back and say,
Zero.
No one is good enough
You're
this
all
year.
ordinary. Get out. Come back next year.
So I did find that fascinating. So
Yeah.
the one that's on display there, the painting by Black Douglas, is officially the 100th winner
Oh, there
of
is
the
something
Archibald
pretty
Prize.
special as well, isn't
Yeah,
it?
the
Then to go along and
centenary
see
winner.
that, yes.
Yeah, so go along. It's $12.50 to go and visit. You've got some concession prices as well that are cheaper than that, but $12.50 to go and look at the Archibald, all the finalists there. It's on display until the 30th of July. So you've got
cool. Got a little bit of time.
2 months to go along and have a look at that there.
Yep.
But it is worthwhile looking at that.
Absolutely.
And then while you're there, you've got other exhibitions you can look at. You've also got the museum side as well, which has got the long-term and the short-term view. But even in the visitors book, I noticed the other day, you've got the Reels exhibition there, which we have mentioned before.
Yes.
And there was
David
a
Mason
visitor.
and the rest.
That's right. You've got a visitor there who's from Melbourne who said they came from Melbourne because they loved the Reels and they wanted to see this exhibition from the Reels.
That's pretty special.
So the art gallery, the Western Plains Cultural Centre, it all works quite well for
Go and grab a
visitation.
coffee as well and a bit of a meal too.
You've got Creo Cafe in there as well, exactly right.
And that's the fact that on Thursday night last week there, you held it was part of a workshop that you attended. Now, this is in regards to, or the main topic of the conversation was the Sandy Creek Solar Farm. Now, this is one of the other wonderful farms being set up here, one of the solar farms set up in our region. Now, this one, I think, is, what's the best way of putting it? This is like on steroids. This sucker is huge. When I read through some of these figures, I couldn't believe what I just read. Look, I'll let you explain to our listeners what's actually going on here.
So it was a workshop, and we often hold workshops. Thursday night seemed to be the night for councillors to make sure they keep that free. We have our council meeting the fourth Thursday of each month. We have our committee meetings, standing committee meetings the second Thursday, and then the other Thursdays often get taken up with workshops. So this particular one, I was actually in Sydney because I'd been down to Sydney on Thursday, so I was actually attending this workshop from the airport while I was waiting for my flight. So came in by a video conference.
Every minute's important. That's good.
Yeah, that's right. So, and it's always hard when you do that from the airport because you don't want to talk too much because the people around you are going, tell that guy to be quiet. We're sitting at the airport waiting.
I'm sitting here, I've got my Telegraph up, I'm reading, I'm enjoying my life, got a quiet drink. Shut up.
That's right. There's this person over there annoying us all. So the Sandy Creek Solar Farm is one that's owned by Lightsource BP. Now, Lightsource BP have got a solar farm already in this area. If you go from Wellington across to Mudgee, you'll go across the Mudgee Road there on the left-hand side, you'll see a 200-megawatt solar farm.
Okay.
And you look at that, you think, wow, that's huge. Look at all those solar panels. That's incredible. This particular one is an 840 megawatt solar farm.
Over 4 times bigger.
Correct.
Now,
Now you're talking about 1.4 million solar panels.
That's the figure that got me. I could not believe when I read that. 1.4 million solar panels.
Now, who counted those? Who went around and went,
God.
let's make sure we get all these solar panels?
How many nuts and bolts do you need to put those things in?
Now, it hasn't started. Construction hasn't started yet.
It's huge.
It's still going through the planning process. This will be part of the RES. Now, remember, we've talked about before the Central West Arana Renewable Energy Zone.
Yeah.
The projects that we see there now, the 200 megawatt, for example, they're not technically part of the RES because they're not connecting to the new power lines. This one will. This probably won't start construction until about 2025.
Okay.
But it gives you an idea of the sort of money that we're going to see thrown around in the RES. Again, 1.4 million solar panels don't erect themselves.
No,
you need a lot of people there working on that.
Absolutely.
This will be located, if you like, on a spot. If you drew a triangle from Dubbo to Dunedoo to Golgong and had that as a triangle, pretty much in the middle of that is where this solar installation will occur. Yep. It's, if you like, about 25 kilometres southwest of Dunedoo, 30 kilometres northwest of Golgong. And sits probably, it's almost actually spot on 50-50 in the Warrumbungle Shire Council local government area and the Dubbo Regional Council local government area.
Yep.
We're expecting from this presentation that we saw on Thursday night, we're expecting probably 35 years of lifetime with this installation.
Right.
Once you get to the end of that, I would imagine that someone says, okay, our solar panels aren't as efficient as they used to be now. Maybe we're down to 80% efficiency compared to brand new. Do we just then pull them out of the ground, restore it back to how it was and move away? Or do we say we've put all the infrastructure in, let's just replace the solar panels and rejuvenate those? I imagine that's what will happen. But to give you an idea, the whole RES, the first size of that RES when it was announced for the Central West Arana RES was 3 gigawatts. 840 megawatts means that this is a fairly large chunk of this, but already we're hearing some discussions, nothing official yet, that the 3 gigawatts from our particular RES will probably grow to 5 gigawatts, maybe larger, but certainly probably around that 5 gigawatt size.
So to put that into layman's terms for the average Joe Blow out there like me, how does that actually work then from the point of view of how many cities would you be able to light? How many people would be able to benefit from that?
So the 3 gigawatt solar or the RES there at 3 gigawatts, approximately that will do 47% of the households in this state, or approximately it would do 10% of all the power used by this state.
That's amazing.
So that's all going to be provided by this RES around the Badangra, Wellington area, but obviously it goes across to a couple of other LGAs as well. Now, one of the things we've talked about before is that a solar farm doesn't have any compulsory process.
Say, is there any financial, opportunities for us here?
Obviously employment. So there'll be approximately 10 full-time operational jobs created from this. But during construction, as you can imagine, 1.4 million solar panels, there'll be hundreds of people employed in that process. So that's one thing. But the community benefit funds or ways that we get money coming back into the community in cold, hard cash, as we talked about before, if it's a wind farm, it's compulsory to have that process in place. A solar farm, not so much. Don't understand why. I talk to everyone that cares. Listen to me about it. I want that to change. In this particular case, Lightsource BP have said, yes, we'll happily sit down with council or the councils involved, the two councils involved, and go through and have a discussion around a voluntary planning agreement and have some funds put aside there and have those delivered to the community every year.
Is that enforceable?
Well, this is the problem, isn't it? Lots of solar farms say, happy to have discussions. They say, we'll talk to councils about that, talk to the local area about that. And they do talk about it. But when it comes time to sign on the dotted line and hand over some cold hard cash.
Words are good, actions are better.
That's right. So, again, I did bring that up at the meeting on Thursday night and said, we hear from solar farm operators sometimes that they're willing to do something, but it never seems to eventuate. Can you tell us you'll definitely do it? Oh, definitely. We'll definitely have those discussions with you.
I've got the contract here. Can you sign here for us, please?
And that's the problem. So we'll keep working with them. They're quite good to have discussions with, but let's see what happens in terms of that final outcome. But it's still, again, you'll still see employment. You'll still see people living in the area. You'll still see money coming into the area from a whole range of things. And you'll see roads upgraded because you have to have the roads to a certain standard for all these things to occur in the first place. So there will be benefits. My objective is to get those long-term benefits. Now, last week you heard me talk about the REAC, the Renewables, Education and Activity Centre. And I'm keen to talk to companies like Energy Co, for example, to see if we can deliver something. What's interesting from Lightsource BP is they're already talking about doing some form of industry training and education centre that will involve solar, which is their focus.
In this region here where they're talking about.
Absolutely right, very close to Wellington. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And they're trying to get on board the network operator, some wind farm operators, and do this industry education because they see that as being good for the region as well. I got very excited when I started hearing all this.
Maybe your idea and their idea sort of linking somehow together here?
Absolutely spot on. Why not have the industry education and the public education? Because you'd use some of the same assets for that. They're talking about having a mini tower to do working with height certification, for example.
Sounds like a conversation we had last week.
Oh, it does.
Yeah.
So, yes, I got very excited. I've already talked to them a bit further after the workshop about how can you tie in this idea for long-term visitation, long-term education, and your short-term needs for industry education. Nothing definite out of that, obviously, at this stage, but certainly we're working, or I am working towards making sure we get long-term benefits there. So
I like that.
It's happening. It's all happening there. The people that say, let's stop this happening, you're not going to do that. No. Let's see how we can gain benefits from it.
Absolutely. Again, during the week there, Matt, you had a local government procurement dinner with execs and sponsors. Procurement. So I suppose being the English teacher coming out of me here, I'm thinking the fact this is to procure, to gain, so is this a group that council uses to procure, to gain, it's like almost like a middleman operation, say for, I don't know, bitumen, concrete, cement, whatever?
So you've got Local Government New South Wales is the peak body for local governments across the state.
Right.
And most councils across the state are members of Local Government New South Wales.
Yep.
Over the years, Local Government New South Wales has identified various business units that would be beneficial to local government in the state. One of those is Local Government Procurement. So they've created an organisation.
So that's the actual title, isn't it? Local Government Procurement is like an agency. It's a group.
It's like a business that sits underneath Local Government New South Wales. Local Government New South Wales owns it, but there's an independent board. That board is appointed by Local Government New South Wales, but they run that as a business. They probably employ 40 staff.
Okay.
And then what they do with that, a couple of things. The first thing, your logic for procurement and the word to procure, absolutely, that makes sense. So that's exactly what it's all about. You can use local government procurement to do contracts for procuring goods, but the advantage is that if you go out, take bitumen that you mentioned, you go out and want to buy a certain amount of bitumen that you might need for the year, you might go out with a contract, you might go out for a tender, and you're one council. So you might require a certain amount of bitumen, and you'll find suppliers of bitumen who will give you a reasonable price based on your level of supply or level of demand that you might need. But if you go to local government procurement, they might have gone out and already secured a contract that might be the amount of bitumen they might need for all the councils or all the participating councils across the state.
So you assume then their buying power will be stronger.
Correct. Now, you pay, or we don't pay, but the process has that the way the business runs, local government procurement runs, is that they take 1% of these contracts. So they might go out and say, rather than 100 councils needing 1 tonne of bitumen, and they might go out and say, we need, and so then you've got 100 individual contracts, we need 100 tonnes of bitumen, and let's go out and get the best price we possibly can for that. And I reckon that price would be better to whoever is successful in that than the 100 individual councils getting 1 tonne each. So then they take their 1% commission, if you like, off that, and then they can supply that bitumen to various councils that might come along to them. There's actually a process that you can utilise where you don't need to go to tender in the traditional way, so it can actually make it quicker.
Okay.
Local government procurement also does a basis where they'll do consultancy work, if you call it that, where they'll actually organise an entire tender for you as well. So if you don't have the staff within your organisation to go through and organise a tender, you can actually contract out on a fee-for-service basis to LGP to say, can you please run this tender for us so that we can then take the tender documentation back to our councillors for them to say, yes, make a decision on that. So they run a number of services for local government. And what they had in Dubbo during the week was, yes, I went to dinner with the various execs and some of the sponsors, but the next day after that dinner, they also had a mini conference, seminar, whatever you might want to call it. And this is a bit of the bread and butter for Dubbo. There were probably 40 people at the seminar. I went along in the morning and welcomed them all to Dubbo, officially opened the seminar and let them have their discussions throughout the day. But that sort of event where you've got 40 people attending or 50 or 100, there's so many of those events that I certainly see in Dubbo, and I don't see all of them. these are the bread and butter. We've got good accommodation in Dubbo. We've got lots of places you can hold that. This particular one was held in the giraffe room at the the zoo.
So where's that located? Is that near the Savannah Room or?
Not quite. As you come into the zoo, just on the left-hand side, there's a little building there that holds about 40 or 50 people.
Oh, there you go. I didn't even know that.
Smaller than the Savannah Room.
Yep.
Not quite the same view as the Savannah Room.
Yeah.
But again, we've got the zoo there. And I know they had a lunchtime safari event organised as part of their visit to the zoo. So it makes it attractive for people to come along. And I talked to a few people there before the conference actually started, and they said they haven't been to Dubbo. There was one person from Bathurst, for example, said, we haven't been to Dubbo for years. So we tend to go towards Sydney more so than out west. But, gee, it's great to be in Dubbo, and place is pumping and it's really looking good and all the rest of it, and warmer than Bathurst, they commented as well, which is good. But
very easy to do this time of year.
And you never know what you're going to get out of that. So that was basically a range of employees from various councils. We had some of our staff there, for example, just talking about procurement and the challenges. I mean, one of the challenges is getting hold of the product. We talk to developers at the moment, just getting stormwater pipes for a development that might be being built, maybe a 12-month delay.
Yeah, right.
And one of the things, I talked to the CEO, Luke, at one stage there, and just talked to him about some of his challenges. One of his challenges is being able to get supply. When you go along as an individual council and we say, again, use the bitumen, we need a ton of bitumen, then, well, sure, but it's a bit hard to get bitumen at the moment, so you might have to wait 6 months for that. But local government procurement, because they're ordering 100 tonnes, then the suppliers are more likely to make sure that their supply is consistent.
The big payers first,
Correct.
I suppose.
Yeah, exactly right. So that is one of the challenges, though, without a doubt. Luke said that a real challenge for them is making sure they can deliver on what the local government sector needs, more so than the individual council. So that's a challenge. But you never know what you're going to find out. And one of the conversations I had was with a sponsor of this particular event was Origin Energy.
Right.
And there was an exec from Melbourne that had flown up for this particular event. And at the dinner, I sat down beside this particular lady and chatted about a few different things. And she said, now, I've heard that Dubbo's going quite well in the adoption of EVs. And I've actually heard this council is very progressive in the adoption of EVs. And I talked about that a little bit. She said, well, you might be interested in a new plan from Origin. I said, do tell. I'm always happy to hear what's happening. And they've got now a specific EV plan.
Right.
And I thought, well, what's an EV plan look like? What have you done in your electricity pricing that possibly could benefit EV owners? So if you've got an EV, you can apply for this plan. So it's not just handed out to anyone. You've actually got to prove that you've got
the fact you've got an EV.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I think there's a couple of conditions around that, but I'll let people go and look at them themselves. But if you then are approved, you get free electricity, not cheap,
good. Yeah.
free electricity between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. every day of the week.
Just say that again. So,
I know.
So if you've got an EV and you go to Origin Energy and prove the fact you've got an EV, you can get free electricity from 10 to 3 during the day.
And that's not just to use for your EV. That's for everything. So if you want to run your washing machine at that time, or your dishwasher,
or
your dryer,
or whatever you want to get there,
pool,
those major suckers of electricity.
That's right. Yeah. So you get free electricity. Now, the logic here is that just in the same way that off-peak electricity was created because you had large coal-fired power stations and you couldn't just turn them off at the middle of the night when you didn't need so much power. So a creation of off-peak power was designed, and then you had various things that used off-peak power because they wanted to keep the coal-fired power stations running overnight. It's the same logic here in that they've got too much power in the middle of the day.
The solar,
with all the
etc.
solar.
Yes.
Exactly right. So many people have got solar, and Dubbo's a great adopter of rooftop solar. We at one stage we were the highest per capita connector in the nation.
Wow. Okay.
So they've got too much power in the middle of the day. So what do? They say, well, we'll give it away during the middle of the day if we can get some more clients out of it.
Are they advertising this? I haven't even heard this out there.
It's a very new plan. So this particular exec told me that, yes, it's a brand new plan. You might see it advertised shortly, but you can go on their website now and you can go and apply for this plan straight away. Wow. So plug your EV in the middle of the day, fantastic, but also run your other appliances.
Do everything else as well. Yeah.
If you're doing some work from home, which some people do now, then the day you work from home, use that as a day you plug in your EV, but even on weekends, it's 7 days a week.
So it's not just Monday to Friday, it's Saturday and Sunday as well.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm plugging Origin Energy here. I'm doing a little sales advert for it, but this is fantastic news.
It does feel a bit like a bit of a plug for Origin, but again, it's one of those things. When I say to someone, I've got to go and attend a dinner tonight, I've got to go to a function, whatever it might be, people say, well, how does that benefit Dubbo? And I don't always know that it does. It's one of those things that you're making contacts, you're making connections, you're having conversations, but straight away I went, wow, I didn't know about this, and I wouldn't have known about this except I might have seen it in an ad in a few months' time, but sitting down having dinner.
The little opportunistic sort of meetings that sort of pop up like this.
Yeah, and you don't know what you don't know.
No,
so
that's
you,
right.
you don't know these things until you have those conversations. But anyway, local government procurement is a function or a facility that we use in our council. Lots of councils across the state use it. Good to see functions in Dubbo, but also interesting to see what other conversations occur.
That's so true. Now, I notice, Matt, you're back down to Sydney again for your regular, almost seems like a weekly sort of thing these days, down there, catching up with these ministers. And I noticed that during the week you managed to catch up with a few more ministers. You went to the Office of the Premier, which is one of the officers there, one of the groups. And, of course, you met with the Honourable Rose Jackson and Tara Moriarty. You've been busy.
Very busy.
Very busy. Talk me through it. How did it all go?
Office of the Premier, so we met with some of the staff, 3 of the staff there from the Premier's office. Chris Minns wasn't available, unfortunately, but this was really...
You met Chris Minns yet?
I have met Chris Minns when he was leader of the opposition. He came along to a Regional Cities New South Wales meeting and he actually presented quite well and had a good discussion with him after that meeting. So he seems like a down-to-earth, grounded individual and really focused on how he can deliver for the state. Haven't met with him as Premier yet, but certainly will meet with him as Premier.
Yep.
And one of the discussions, or the main discussion for this particular meeting with his office, was around Regional Cities New South Wales. We've had a memorandum of understanding that we've signed in the past with the past government. Now, technically, that MOU runs out on the 30th of June this year.
Right.
I did say to his staff that you could almost argue that it's run out because there's a change of government, even though, yes, that was signed on behalf of the government. But I'm pretty keen to make sure we get a new MOU signed.
Yep.
And part of that really is making sure the new government is on board with Regional Cities New South Wales and understanding the place that they can play in helping the government and helping regional cities. So that was the main part of that discussion.
Yep.
We said we'll send you
Did
through.
it go all right, the discussions?
Fantastic.
Good.
Again, you're talking to the staff there. We need Chris Minns, or it might be Tara Moriarty, who signs off on that as the relevant minister, but essentially we left that to the government. We'll send you a copy of the latest MOU, see if you want any changes made, but we want to get that signed fairly soon, again, before the end of the month would be good. So that was fantastic. Good. And then the 2 ministers we met with, Rose Jackson, as you mentioned, and Tara Moriarty, a little bit different focus there. With Rose, there was a bit of a Dubbo focus on water because she's Minister for Water, also Minister for Homelessness. And we talked about a few strategies the government's got in place. One of the strategies, which I'm not quite sure how they're going to do, but one of the strategies is to look at maybe some Crown land, look at some private land, maybe look at some government land, some council-owned land, a whole range of options there to try and provide some housing and then develop that housing, get some help from the state government developing that, but then having a definitive number of 30% of that land that has to be allocated, or the housing has to be allocated to affordable and social housing.
Yeah, right.
Now, at this stage, it's a general statement rather than hard and fast, because when I did ask Rose how you would allocate that 30% to affordable and social, is that 15% and 15%? It was, well, we won't get into the detail yet because the detail hasn't been developed. And how you then allocate that affordable housing, who gets that affordable housing. There was some discussion at some point that the government employees, teachers, police, nurses, that type of government employee might get access to that affordable housing, but then how do you allocate that? It was a general discussion, but
so it's a bit of an idea sort of thing they're presenting right now.
Probably more that than anything else, but the first part is a recognition there are some people out there homeless. How do we try and address that? Housing is an issue. How do you try and address that? So that's all important because she's Minister for Housing as well. She's Minister for everything. She's got a few portfolios.
Right now. That's right, yes.
But also water. Rose had some comments to make about Dubbo's water before the election, so we're keen for Rose to understand our challenges. And we talked about turbidity, and she hadn't heard about this before, but there was the issue around the turbidity level when we can deliver water as safe, in inverted commas, to the community.
So these are like the extra substances in the water sort of thing, is it?
Floaties in the water, if you like.
Okay, there we go.
And the turbidity level across the state used to be a level of 1. I don't know what the units for measurement of turbidity are, but 1 was the level. So if we were treating water and delivering out the end that was below a level of 1, then it was okay. There was a voluntary process that council went through several years ago where councils or water utilities across the state were told that maybe 0.5 would be even safer than 1. And so it was voluntary. Now, our council of the day said, sure, we'll go to a level of 0.5. And then when we had our bore water alerts last year, when we had a lot of that flooding, our turbidity level got to as high as about 0.6 very briefly, but because it was 0.5, it was deemed that we had to go to boil water alert. If we had left it at 1, it would have been safe. So I went through and explained that in detail to Rose, but talked about the fact that there is a challenge, an ongoing challenge with climate change, that we will see the quality of the water from our river deteriorate, and so we'll have more examples where we'll be potentially above 0.5, so we've got to address that with our water treatment processes. So more than happy for Rose to have a discussion with us around all of that. Again, getting an understanding. And that's part of the job that I see for our perspective is when we talk to ministers, make sure they understand our challenges.
It's wonderful though. This is all part of the reason why you go down to Sydney so regularly, is so you can have these conversations with the people who can make the change happen. You know, these are... I suppose it reminds me of the stage show Hamilton. You know, you've got to be in the room where it matters. If you're not in the room, well, it doesn't really matter. You've got to be in the room there with these people. And I think that's a really classic example of why it's important you continue to go down and see these people.
It is about establishing these relationships and connections. And because they're all new, and for most of these people, they haven't been in government before. They've got a lot to learn. And I can see definitely that part of our role in terms of being in council as mayors across the state is to make sure that we're feeding community information through to these ministers. Tara Moriarty was a slightly different conversation. She's Minister for Ag, Minister for Regional New South Wales and Minister for Western New South Wales.
Another one of those ladies who has an exceptional amount of hats to her portfolio.
Correct. And so that was around a discussion. Really, from our perspective of that one, it was making sure that she understands that she's got somewhere to go if she wants information about regional. And again, I suppose I'm putting briefly my hat as the chair of Regional Cities New South Wales on and saying when you don't know what's happening, when you want to understand things better, use us as a resource. We think we can help your government and make decisions that are better for regional areas. And we think you can help us in helping to progress regional cities across the state, and obviously a bit of a discussion around that MOU as well. So lots to chat about there. But and again, I suppose people don't realise the time that you take up sometimes in terms of what's happening. I was at that local government procurement dinner on Wednesday night. That was till whatever time, 9:30, whatever time I finished that dinner. And then the next morning I was at their function, officially opening that function. I had to go to a Reconciliation Week meeting then, and that was a great function I went to there. Then on a plane down to Sydney, have these various meetings with those various ministers, sit at the airport, do a video conference for that workshop, and then finally get in a plane and fly back home.
I feel tired just listening to that.
That's just one day.
I'm glad you got the energy. I really do. Look here, in regards to one of the things that happened during the week was the discussion here about the CEO performance review. So this is obviously in regards to our CEO, Murray Wood. Now, it looks like every 12 months there's a bit of a formal review that takes place. Talk us through it. How did the review go this week for Murray?
Well, there's a couple of things about this. There's only one person that councillors employ, and that's the CEO. There are 500 full-time staff at council, but we only employ one. The other 499 are the responsibility of the CEO, and obviously as they go through their directors and their various divisions. So it's really important that we understand the roles of the CEO and also have that open communication and relationship. Now, I obviously communicate with Murray daily. My wife does complain that I probably talk to Murray more than I talk to her. And it's probably true.
He's a lovely bloke, though. I can understand you want to talk to Murray.
He's a lovely bloke. And we certainly have a formal sit-down on a regular basis. But it's important to do a formal review as well. Now, as with any employee-employer relationship, you hope that that formal review doesn't pop up and they get surprises. You want to have that ongoing communication. But every 12 months. So essentially the employment scenario started around the November timeframe. So every November we do a formal review where we do have myself as the mayor, we have the deputy mayor, and then the three chairs of the three standing committee meetings or three standing committees. We have a formal review. Now in that we have an independent person sitting in the room. Now I talked before about local government procurement being a business of local government New South Wales. There's another business called Local Government Employment Solutions, which is again another business of Local Government New South Wales, realising that there are lots of opportunities there for employment solutions, i.e. going out and finding new staff, new directors, new CEOs, doing the formal reviews, etc. So we sit down with Local Government Employment Solutions with those 5 people around the November timeframe each year. But at about the halfway mark during those 12-month reviews, so around the May, June timeframe, we typically do a smaller review where we involve Local Government Employment Solutions and myself and the CEO, and we sit down and just go through that review. It's still formal, but we don't have all those other people from the council there.
Is it mainly about posing questions of areas of focus, or what's the main focus there?
It's looking at the KPIs that we've set as a council and just seeing how the council is performing and how Murray's performing against those KPIs. And it's a good opportunity just to sit down and talk about how things are progressing from both sides. So, Murray, how are things progressing from your side? How's the communication going with councillors, et cetera, et cetera?
Yep.
And from my side, how are things going? And the really tough part for anyone in a position such as Murray is that Murray's relying on the performance of his staff for his performance review. So we can say, Murray, this project that we're working on, why is it falling behind schedule? That's reflecting poorly on you.
Yep.
He can have all the excuses.
Like a coach of a football team, isn't it, really?
A bit like that. He can have all the excuses in the world about why it's not going so well. The staff that might be working on that, or there might be someone that's on leave, or whatever it might be, but ultimately it reflects on that particular person. So that's the challenge for Murray. But again, Murray's doing a good job where, certainly from my point of view, from the performance review that I did, certainly happy with how he's performing against the KPIs. And certainly at the last formal review with all the various councils involved there, and then back to the council meeting, certainly a very good report back from those councillors there. But again, it's important to keep doing those reviews and keep looking at how things are progressing and how we can improve. That's always the ultimate aim.
That's exactly right. I noticed here the fact that you got the chance to meet with Beryl Mortimer during the week. She's the president of the Dubbo Squash Club. Had a bit of a discussion here about the squash facilities in Dubbo. Now, I remember as a kid, and you're probably the same way, Matt, that we seem to have had a lot of squash courts growing up as kids, didn't we?
Yeah, I love squash. I used to play a lot of squash
it was a wonderful
as
sport,
a kid.
wasn't it?
And even after that, I remember playing my brother-in-law over in Perth one time. We were there and I was going to have a game of squash. So it was a common thing that you do. And it was cheap. It was fairly easy to get a racket. Maybe not buy a racket. You could hire one from somewhere. You could get a racket.
Go down on a Saturday afternoon with your mates and have a game of squash.
And not like tennis where you keep losing balls over the outside fence. You didn't lose the ball too often in a squash court because it wasn't very far for it to go. Now, and I think you're right. There was Dubbo Sports World, which is now Ben Fernie Flour Mills. And I don't remember exactly, but they told me that the members of the Dubbo Squash Club that I met with said that there were probably about 15 courts.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
That's a lot of courts.
That's a lot of courts. And I remember when you told me about this, and I had to sort of stop and think, were there 15 courts? And then I had a bit of a think. I thought, you're probably right.
Yeah, and we'd play at school. That was one of the sports we'd choose when we tick the boxes there. And you'd go down, and it was unusual not to hear a bunch of noise from all these different courts with people playing squash.
Yep, the squeaky sound of the sneakers.
Yeah, that's right.
Dunlop volleys.
And then there were 8 courts at the RSL club as well.
Yes,
and they used to have the coin slots. And I actually found one of them. I stuck a photo up on social media of one of the old coin slots at the RSL club where you put it in and you could put up to 4 20-cent coins in.
Geez, you must have been rich.
And I didn't say I did. I said you could. But I don't know how long that got you for, but I remember you'd put them in and you'd have it tick away and then you'd suddenly be playing in the dark.
That's
so
right,
go and stop.
It's match point and it all suddenly go dark and then you get the ball and smack your mate with it or something.
So one of the concerns from the squash club was that we had about, and I don't know it's absolutely accurate, but about 23 courts. And that's back around the 80s, maybe 90s. And we had, I think it was Peter Deacon who owned Dubbo Sports World.
Yes, it was Peter someone, wasn't it? That's right. Yeah,
very strong advocate.
Yes.
And he had tournaments where he'd bring out the world champion from Pakistan and we'd have Jeff Hunt come along. That's right. I mean, that was a big name in squash.
That big exhibition match too, wasn't there? Yes.
Yeah. So again, with anything like this, you need people that are passionate and really drive it. So he did that, definitely. And it really put Dubbo on the map for squash and really lots of people like you and I are going, let's go and play squash.
Absolutely.
We're now down to 2 squash courts in Dubbo.
It's a bit sad,
From a peak of 23 down to 2. Now, obviously, that's a concern for the Dubbo Squash Club. Unfortunately, it does come back to numbers. So I gave them a few strategies to work with. I just don't think council's got any money to go and build squash courts. And you look at the participation levels, and again, with only 2 squash courts there, obviously...
Did you have some figures there? Do you know what's happened with squash? Or?
Well, they didn't have any specific figures around... They told me how many turned up to their competition, but I did a research while we were sitting there talking. They said the number of players of squash, regular players in squash in Australia back in its heyday, around the 80s and 90s, about 1 million people regularly played squash.
Yeah, right. Okay. Which you think about the Australian population back in the 80s. It's
correct.
Less than it was today, or is today.
Yeah, so that's not
big
bad.
Numbers.
When you look at today... there are a couple of different sites that I found, but probably 100,000, maybe 150,000 regular players. So it has dropped.
10%, isn't it? What
yeah,
it was?
and I didn't know why, but I asked the Dubbo Squash Club if they had any idea why. But remember, there used to be a bit of publicity saying, "Don't play squash; you'll have a heart attack. Get out there on the squash court because maybe."
Well, there was a couple of examples of guys
Correct.
dropping dead playing squash. Yeah,
that's right.
It was a very sad one.
If they dropped dead playing squash, if they went for a run
same thing.
or they played
That's
tennis, the same thing would probably happen. They're probably putting stress on their heart.
Yep.
I don't want to give medical advice here, but they're probably putting stress on their heart.
That's right, absolutely.
And their body wasn't ready for it.
Yes, I don't think it was the squash that was the issue. It was the exercise that obviously created the issue. And I'm not saying don't do exercise, but these poor guys, for those reasons. That's
doing some exercise at a high intensity level
Yes.
and then going, oh, my body's not ready for it, and then collapsing and obviously dying. So maybe that was part of it. I don't really know exactly why, but I'm happy to support a movement for more squash courts in Dubbo. But
So they want more squash courts?
They need more squash courts. They can't play competitions. They can play competitions, but only small ones. They can't attract larger competitions here. And for people that, if you and I decide this afternoon, let's go and have a bit of a hit of squash, then you're probably going to struggle to get on a court because there's only two. But again, not many people are playing it, so maybe we could get on a court.
Is this something, though, that the squash society here needs to probably take up more with the current facilitators of squash?
Well, they could probably talk to the RSL club and say, can we have more courts? But obviously the RSL club has got to cater to what their members need as well. It's one of those things that...
Is it a business decision, though?
Well, it probably is a business decision from the RSL club, but it's one of those things I think that really you just need to drive with some passion, get more people involved. And then if the demand is there with enough people playing, that might be when you'll finally get someone, maybe a private person, maybe with PCYC, and they have talked to the PCYC about having squash as part of that new facility, the new sports facility. That'll probably be some time down the track before that happens. But then keep in mind you've got the indoor cricket centre up on Sheraton Road, that probably the basketball courts there will be used less once the PCY facility is built. Maybe that's an opportunity to build squash courts there. But again, whatever you do, you need people. So you need to generate some interest.
And I suppose in regards to that, is there anything that the council can do in regards to this to assist the squash group?
It's probably something that we've talked about it before, where some organisations have received a $100,000 interest-free loan from council, for example, to help. If, for example, they wanted to take the old tennis courts on Elston Park, just on the side of Elston Park, if they said, let's build a squash facility there, they'd need to get some funding from somewhere. That's council land. That'd be something I think council would be open to that idea.
Yeah.
But again, it all comes down to numbers. It comes down to users. How many people can you get there? No council or government is going to support something where you just don't have enough people using the facility. So I suppose it's up to them to generate interest and generate the numbers in it is the bottom line from that perspective.
Sounds about right. Now, you and I were down there this morning strutting our stuff in the park run. It was actually quite nice there. We're sort of heading off. We're doing our little thing this week. Weather's been quite conducive to a bit more of a run. But I do notice the fact that down there on the Lady Cutler South Oval, where the banks have been eroded away and there's currently the barriers are up, it looks as though the fact that council is finally going to make some movement here to readjust that walkway. Is that all about to happen this week?
That's about to happen on the 5th of June, Monday the 5th of June, that will start.
Happy days, that's it.
So we've got a temporary realignment there at the moment where we've basically got it cordoned off where you shouldn't run on the path. Some people tend to move those.
Yes, those barriers seem to be more of an option for some people, yes.
Some people, that's right.
Yes.
But hopefully people take notice of those. But we're actually going to reconstruct the path and redo the lighting there.
Oh, good.
And that all starts on Monday so that then that will be the way you walk around. Now, that'll take about 2 weeks for that construction.
Okay.
So during that time, it'll be a bit hard to get past there. Yep. And I've actually spoken to the parkrun organisers and they're going to create some other alternative route for that 1 or 2 weeks that you won't be able to run there for parkrun. And I did have to declare a conflict of interest in this at council when we were going forward with this, in particular with the reconstruction.
Yes. Where's your conflict of interest on this one?
Well, I did say that at the moment on the gravel path, you're running on that for parkrun, and the new area that will divert around that area to basically help make sure that riverbank doesn't collapse further will be concrete. and I think you'll probably run a bit faster on concrete rather than gravel. So I had to declare a conflict of interest.
Well, I
saying,
know that was going that way.
saying that I might actually take 1 or 2 seconds off my park run times by running on concrete. So I've got to be careful that I'm making...
Well, see, for a bloke like you, take a couple of seconds off your park run time will actually probably make a difference. Taking a couple of seconds off my park run time is like, whatever.
A couple of seconds. I don't care what time you're running, it's always a couple of seconds. But yeah, so I had to declare that I'm not making council decisions to put a concrete path in just to help my park run time. If it helps the park run time as well, I'm happy with that.
Well, mate, it's that time of the week. It's been a busy little session again today. Got through a lot, so it's time for your Limerick of the week. What have you got for us this week?
The significant event of the week is obviously the opening of the Archibald, so I can't get past that. So the Limerick reflects on that this week. In the heart of Dubbo's art scene, the Archibald Finalists do convene, with brush, paint and flair showing talents so rare, an art spectacle like none ever seen.
Oh, now, mate, you may not be able to sort of pick up a paintbrush and do much with it, but you can certainly have that talent of the wordsmith. Well done. Well, folks, that, of course, wraps us up for another episode of Straight from the Mayor's Mouth. Until next week, everyone, you guys take care.
Straight from the Mayor's Mouth with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.